Welcome to True Talk on WMNF 88.5 with Ahmed and Summer. Summer is out today. On today's program, we're going to be speaking about what's happening with the Democratic Party and its stance on Gaza. We'll be speaking especially to a local Democratic Party member, an activist, longtime member, part of the leadership at some point, and efforts to try to push him out because he has been vocal about what's happening in Gaza, saying that it's a genocide. People in leadership, while most Democrats across the country agree that there should be a ceasefire and what Israel is doing is illegal, however, somehow the establishment or people that are in control of the party across the nation and even here don't seem to think so, and they're trying to silence those that are saying otherwise. So then we may have some time for your phone calls. It's a live show today. We'll be right back. This is True Talk on WMNF.
يا حنينة تفرقنا مشينا وقلت يا حزرها ما حلينا ذراري الدنيا محلاها ماما وزينها ديما مواتاها محلاها الحومة ديما الحومة مظلومة قتلتنا الشيخة وزادت قتلتنا الحكومة فكرت اللمة قسمنا اللي فما وكل حد وهمه وكنا محلانا واليوم زمامة وبكات الماما شو مات في الشمة شكون اللي بلانا فكرت أصحابي حبوا على خرابي عطيتهم مترابي فرشوش وكفرشنا زرابي غيب على روحي ما نعيبش على قرابي رقدت ونحلم وفكت نجري على سرابي وفي غيبوبة وينك يا صحوبة وطلعوا ذيوبة وناس خوانا بيوتنا مقلوبة.
Welcome back to True Talk on WMNF with Ahmed and Summer. Today is Thursday, January 9th. We're live in the studio. It's getting cold outside here in Florida, but of course, much better in the rest of the country. Where up north, there are snowstorms, and out west, there are all these wildfires that are destroying so many homes. Of course, we pray for those individuals, but it's really unfortunate that at a time when we have all these climate change issues and fires and storms that governments in California are cutting back as far as funding for fire departments and increasing budgets for police. Is that, the role of the government should be there to help protect people and not necessarily just to police them. And this is what we're faced with. And California is one of the most progressive states in the country. There are a lot of people that are going onto it because a lot of the homes that are being destroyed are in some of the richest counties or neighborhoods in the country. Some of those are Hollywood stars. One specific person, James Wood, has, I guess, Twitter and social media have been going after him because he went on CNN crying about his house being destroyed. While that is unfortunate, but this is the same person that tweeted early on that killed them all in Gaza and no compromise, no ceasefire, and keep on going. People in Gaza and others are actually replying back now saying this is what we've been going under. And in fact, it's man-made. It's bombs that are happening that are raining down on us. So he's not getting much sympathy, but people are also writing him letters encouraging him that maybe he'll rethink his hateful messaging and his calls to destroy entire populations and continue that ethnic cleansing. We are days away from the inauguration of Donald Trump, and he's had several news conferences where, when it comes to the issue of the Middle East and Gaza, he said if the hostages are not released, all hell is going to break out. And when he's asked further, what does that mean? He would not elaborate because he's now repeated that comment or that threat a number of times, and people don't really know exactly what that means. And he said it's not going to be good for anybody. There is speculation that a deal is in the works that would be there in time by the time Donald Trump comes into office. Mainly, the main obstacle for a ceasefire deal has been and continues to be Benjamin Netanyahu. That's not by my account. That's everyone is saying that, including the Biden administration. However, the Biden administration, who has tools to be able to put pressure on Netanyahu, has refused to do so. Blinken and Biden and others in this administration continue to give a green light and just not even hold him accountable for their own, for violating American laws like the Leahy law and others. So a lot is going to be happening in the coming weeks. We're going to see Trump is saying he wants to take over Canada as well as the Panama Canal and Greenland. And I don't know. He did say he's not going to go to war and he's opposed to endless wars and expansionist and he's an isolationist. But right from the get-go, sounds very expansionist and imperialistic to us that are observing this. Why specifically Greenland? Well, as the glaciers there, because, Greenland is basically almost in the Arctic and full of ice, but because of climate change, things are melting. It's actually opening up maritime routes for shipping, and that would be something that's critical. Whoever controls that part will have a huge advantage over trade worldwide. Panama Canal is another logistics and trade route that's important to the Western Hemisphere. So they're saying the American military built it, should be in American hands. Canada, I don't know what the justification for that is, but he tweeted that, a map of the United States that includes Canada and another map that included the entire North America with the American flag on it. Justin Trudeau, who resigned, is saying, no way, but I'm not sure what else he can do. So we'll see what happens. Is America going down the drain? And this could have been so much different had we had a different Democratic Party. I think Gaza had a lot to do with Kamala Harris losing and the Democrats losing because, after all, 7 to 10 million voters that voted for Biden stayed home this election around this, in the 2024 election where Trump pretty much got the same number of votes. So Kamala and the Democratic leadership lost those votes. People stayed home, didn't think they need to show up. And I think a lot of that had to do with Gaza. And of course, a lot of it also had to do with people don't see that their lives are changing, especially when it comes to, the middle class. But today I wanted to have a conversation with a local Democratic activist who's been part of the Democratic Party for some time. And there are now efforts, I was surprised to learn, there are efforts to try to push him out of the party completely. This is somebody who's dedicated a number of years towards the party, getting out the vote, getting people registered to vote, helping the Democrats win different elections locally. And yet, they're trying to push him out, not because of any type of scandal, but because he has been questioning what the Biden administration has been doing in Gaza. So you might think Gaza is so far away, what's happening there may not impact us here at home, but right here in Tampa Bay, Hillsborough County, somebody is actually being held, not held accountable, but being persecuted or allegedly, I guess I have to say, because the Democratic Party may come back and say, oh, well, you're taking sides. Well, you decide for yourself after hearing this story, and maybe the Democratic Party leadership will be happy to come on our show and, tell their side of the story. But I'm now joined by Russ Miller, who is a resident of Hillsborough County and part of the Democratic Party here locally. And we want to have a discussion about what's happened to him and also just the bigger picture, what's happening to the Democrats on this issue nationwide. So welcome to True Talk, Russ Miller.
Thank you.
So can you just give me a little bit background? When did you get involved with the Democratic Party?
election cycle and was helping Jessica Harrington, who was more of a Bernie crowd, as we say.
Sorry about that.
Oh, okay.
Some dead air for a while.
Oops.
And not that it was, because normally you're sitting in this chair and that's a different mic, so it's not some sort of conspiracy to silence you.
Okay. Okay.
But it was actually a user error, so sorry about that.
Sounds like I should start over.
You should start over. My question to you.
Okay, how long?
But I think some people did hear because they can hear through my mic, but just
Okay.
brief.
Mhm.
You've been involved now for the past 5 years.
I would say almost 7.
7 years.
Mhm.
You got motivated because of the election of Donald Trump. You wanted to do something about it.
Mm-hmm.
Would you say which kind of side of the Democratic Party are like which wing? Are you more of a
Bernie.
Democrat? Okay.
Certainly.
You're a
Bernie,
progressive.
AOC.
AOC, okay.
Mhm.
That's kind of what you were aligned with.
Right, the
And you
squad.
got motivated because you thought you saw maybe Donald Trump as some sort of threat.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So that's what motivated you to get involved. What happened?
I kind of worked my way up. I was a simple volunteer for a couple of different candidates in 2018. In 2020, I became a volunteer leader for Bernie for president. 2022, I worked actually earning money as a temporary field organizer for the Florida Democratic Party here in Hillsborough County. I helped recruit volunteers to go out and knock on doors, to make phone calls, to help to get Democrats elected. Right after that, I discovered that there was a county party. It's not something that a lot of people realize, that there are precinct captains, hundreds of them, that we need for both parties. It works the same for both parties. There are about 400 precincts in Hillsborough County. I decided to become a precinct committee person. That's the modern term for what a precinct captain is. Because I had previous experience, they were eager, the county party establishment, to figure out what more they could do with me other than just knock on doors and recruit volunteers in my own precinct, which is up in Lutz. And we plugged me in to being what we call the volunteer coordinator for the county as a whole. So I would continue to recruit volunteers and try and find activities that they'd be good at. They have a lot of regional directors, about 7 of them in the county, and I would forward those volunteers to them. And make that connection so that they could find something that would improve our chances of beating the Republicans. Sometimes that involved, when I was lucky, recruiting actual candidates to run for office. We needed a candidate to run for county commission in the northern districts here, and I recruited Patricia Alonso for that. She was a local activist, and she's a very good candidate. I made a few phone calls when someone in District 66, that's a Florida State Legislature district in Northwest Hillsborough, dropped out at the last minute. And Nick Clemente ended up, with 2 hours to go before the deadline, became a state legislator candidate, guaranteeing that we would have a Democratic state legislature candidate in all 120 districts in Florida. We wouldn't be missing even one.
So you started getting involved. Things are going, Did you receive any resistance? People welcomed your participation and activism and involvement, right?
Oh, very much so. I would get a hero's welcome. It was a very warm welcome when I would visit. There's 7 different Democratic clubs.
Okay.
And many Democratic caucuses within Hillsborough County. A club is kind of an extension of the Democratic Executive Committee. That's the long version of the Hillsborough County Democratic Party, because it's the collection of executives, all these precinct captains, and their hierarchy. And they have one in each region of the county. There's one up in North Tampa. There's one near here called the East Hillsborough Democrats. Caucuses aren't based on regions, really. They're based on ideas, ideologies, sometimes
issues.
Ethnicity.
Okay.
Yes, Progressive Caucus. Black Caucus is meeting tonight, by the way.
Oh, okay. Shout out to the Black Caucus.
Yes. And there is also an Education Caucus and a Jewish Caucus.
So there's Identity Caucus. I know, for example, because I was involved in party politics on the national level. For example, there was the American Muslim Democratic Caucus. So the Democratic Party allows for these kind of identity groups or ethnic groups. There's even, I think, there's something called the Ethnic Caucus, which is a combination of different ethnicities on the national level. Of course, there's a Hispanic caucus. So there's something similar to that on the local level in Hillsborough County, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Or across a couple of counties in terms.
And there's like the LGBTQ caucus,
Got one of
etc.
those.
And then what's the goal of these caucuses? To further their issue within the party, or what?
They have multiple goals. They want to bring new people into their movement. They also get the opportunity when candidates are running in primaries, Democratic candidates, to endorse candidates. And so those candidates will go and visit those caucuses to address their issues, to give a speech. There are some other organizations locally, such as, you mentioned there's a Muslim caucus. We've been trying to start one of those in Hillsborough County. That was one of the last things I did as volunteer coordinator, was announced that we were going to try and start a Hillsborough chapter of the Muslim caucus.
Okay.
And Muslims for Democracy and Fairness is a local group that candidates will go to and state their
So those are outside the party. So there are some groups outside and there's some groups within, I guess, the party charter.
Yes. For example, there's a local group called the Leona Huddle down in South Tampa that's all Democrats, but they are not part of the Democratic organization.
And do they
don't have
wield
a
influence
charter.
somehow?
They don't follow the same rules.
But do they wield influence within?
They can. I call them the Green Berets of activism, because they are such a good group at going out and making voter contact. A lot of smart people.
Okay, so let's get back to the party itself. You're getting a hero's welcome, you're active, you're motivated, you're getting other people involved, you're recruiting candidates. And when did you start having problems with the party? When did the party have a problem with you?
Well, I recognized after October 7th of 2023 that there was going to be retaliation against the people in Gaza, and I started to worry about how bad it would be. People who are in the Jewish caucus started making the rounds to these club and caucus meetings to get their point of view across.
Whose point of view? The Israeli point of view?
The pro-Israel point of view.
So quickly, right after October 7th, the Jewish caucus, that's what they call themselves. That's the name.
Hillsborough County Democratic Jewish Caucus.
Okay. So they're going around, they're visiting the clubs to also like either lobby them or inform them or persuade them of their perspective on what's happening there. Was there an ask at the end of, what are they asking for? Or what was their goal of going around and meeting these different clubs?
Well, they would give the details as they had been told by the Israeli government of what happened, as in, like, women had been raped, children had been beheaded, which turned out, according to human rights organizations that investigated this, not to be true. But they would say, we've suffered a lot, and historically that is so true, of pogroms in Eastern Europe, of course, the Holocaust.
Yes.
And say, this is another example of that, and we hope you'll be sympathetic to what's happening in Israel, for the Israeli side, and against Hamas, of course.
Of course. And does that mean support more funding for Israel and sending weapons? And
they didn't make an ask of that kind.
Okay.
No.
But it's that's basically what, in politics in America, the pro-Israel lobby is basically always asking for more funding for Israel.
Right, and they are guaranteed more funding for Israel. That was already in the pipeline. And, of course, President Biden, raised that from, I guess it averaged about $4 billion a year for many decades since the Yom Kippur War in 1973. And last year, while they were prosecuting this conflict, they got about $20 billion. And are scheduled with that, I heard on your radio show as well, $8 billion has already been approved for 2025.
Right. I mean, he's asking for, to do another $8 billion before, he leaves office, or requested as of last week.
Yeah.
But what I'm wondering, were you involved in the Middle East policies or the conflict before all of this, before getting involved within the party, or?
Not involved.
Were you activists on any side?
No. I have a background with a political science degree, and I've always been, since childhood, really interested in military history. So, of course, this conflict was something that I looked at and was interested in. And I came, the more you know, right? About what's happening in a particular conflict, the more you can empathize with both sides. And understand maybe what's about to happen next. And at a Black Caucus meeting, when one of the members of the Jewish caucus came to visit, I mentioned that there was a former secretary within our local progressive caucus who had moved with her Palestinian husband back to the West Bank and their two children. And I had met her and her 2 children before and spoken to her at length. And this was an obvious topic, like, why would you move back to the West Bank? This was 2022.
Okay.
She was losing patience with America. She taught English as a second language, and that's a portable skill. And Palestinians have a strong interest in learning English, so they relocated there. But I was worried. I knew how much violence there was on the West Bank even before Gaza, and I've heard it's increased so much more since then.
Okay, so at a Black Caucus meeting, what happened?
I brought that up.
Okay.
That I knew somebody, and that if we're going to be talking about who we should sympathize in this conflict, we should consider both sides, that not everyone in this meeting knows only people who live in the Israel part of Israel and Palestine.
So which seems like a reasonable thing. Hey, let's consider both sides. And, you weren't saying anything like support. You were not supporting what happened on October 7th or, anything like that. So, but what was the reaction?
Not really much time for a reaction. That was the end of the meeting. The caucus president kind of wrapped things up. I think, actually, if I remember, there was an ask from the Jewish caucus. They would like that particular caucus to make a statement.
Okay.
And she said she would take that to their board. Every club and caucus has a board of directors, and discuss that before she could commit to anything.
So then what happened next as far as...
Very little.
Okay.
For quite a while.
Yeah.
But I have a personal Facebook account.
Okay.
And as things got worse in Gaza, as the bombardment increased, as, of course, they cut off food and medicine to the people, and they had already, since 2006, been denied the right to travel. It's been called, I'm sure people have mentioned on this show, the world's largest open-air prison.
Yes.
And I had
We're speaking about Gaza being
yes.
Yeah,
Gaza
the
Strip.
largest, open-air prison because it's surrounded by walls everywhere and people can't get in and out.
Yeah, and as some people might not know, it's not an entirely Muslim population. There are Eastern Orthodox Christians who live there, Druze, atheists, people who are not religious at all.
You're right. It's just like many other places. Yeah, it's predominantly Muslim. However, there are all types of, and some of the oldest churches in the world were actually in Gaza. Many of them are destroyed now. But okay, so you're posting on Facebook, raising issues.
Right.
When did you start calling it a genocide? Did you use that word?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't remember precisely the
But at
month I
some
would have
point you
called it a
did?
genocide. But I did cite an article in the New Yorker by a Jewish author named Masha Gessen. Masha Gessen. And it was about the legacy of the Holocaust, and the subtitle was The Politics of Memory. And in it, he made a very controversial statement. He said, what's happening in Gaza is not unlike what the Nazis did in Europe when they liquidated the ghetto.
Okay.
Right? And so
did you highlight that statement on your Facebook?
Sure.
Okay.
And a link to the article. But what really got notice was there was a political cartoon that I found and reposted. And I wish I could easily show someone a photo on the air. But it was of an Israeli soldier with a Star of David emblem on his helmet, pointing his rifle at a Muslim woman wearing a hijab, laying on the ground in what was obviously a rubble-strewn area. And he's looking at a mirror, and he's seeing a German soldier with the swastika emblem on his helmet doing the same thing to someone wearing the concentration camp pajamas, laying on the ground. And it said, it's kind of the same thing. I don't remember the exact caption, but that really got the Jewish caucus's attention, and they filed a formal complaint.
So how do you know about the complaint? Who did they file it to, and what? What is a complaint?
At that time,
yeah.
Well, there was a second incident, I should say.
Okay.
There was a Facebook discussion. One of the volunteers that I knew at one of the clubs down south in Sun City Center had done a similar thing, had posted something on Facebook saying, please have sympathy for us because of our legacy. And I said, considering what's happening in Gaza and the deaths right now, I think we probably should set feelings aside and look at what we're going to do to prevent this genocide from getting out of control. And it was already out of control, really. There were so many people dying. It's probably in the hundreds of thousands now, because they don't officially count people who are buried in the rubble who haven't been discovered yet. They don't count deaths that happen from lack of medicine, lack of medical treatment. They only count the people who were directly killed in military action right when they die. And so we're
And
probably
they recover
looking at,
their bodies.
Right. And we're probably looking at, in a population of 2 million, this could be already 10% of the population that's died. And they did screenshots of some portions of the comments that went back and forth and listed that in their complaint as well. And later called it harassment.
Who are they saying you're harassing?
This particular volunteer was also a member of the Jewish Caucus. I don't think they were a member of the board of directors, though, or an officer.
Okay,
in the caucus.
so they're saying like basically your Facebook comments and the posts is a harassment.
Right. And they were saying, as the two other members of the Jewish Caucus jumped into that, that I should not be in a leadership position if I was going to argue that point of view, and that they would not follow me. They didn't include that in their complaint, that they were threatening me, but that was part of the rationale. And what I did right after that conversation, I deleted all of those people from my list of Facebook friends, figuring this is a trap. Right, I've been lured into a trap. And I wrote a very lengthy email to my boss. I work as a volunteer, I should say. I wasn't paid for that.
So it's not a paid role to be the volunteer.
It's not a paid position.
Director or coordinator?
Volunteer coordinator. And it's not part of the hierarchy, the chain of command. And it's not an elected office. But I did still have a boss who was the DEC chair for Hillsborough County.
And who was that?
Ione Townsend at the time. Not anymore. But this was her term in office. And I wrote her a lengthy email saying the thing that most concerned me, what was going on here, and that I thought I would be targeted by this group, was that these children were starving to death. One of my favorite books is God's Men by Pearl Buck, and it has to do with the Boxer Rebellion and an American child who's separated from his family that gets massacred in China in the 20s, but early in the 20th century. And he's alone and wandering around and in tears and starving until someone collects him, a Chinese sympathetic person, and gets him back to the American embassy compound where he's safe. But this affects his life from that point on, and it's a fictional character. But he goes back to America, and because he's so traumatized by having been hungry, he creates these soup kitchens during the Depression, and that's part of his kind of religious awakening. It's very much about helping people. And I told her that's why I was involved with this cause.
I mean, you sympathize with the starving children, which
yes,
who would not? What fault of theirs? They can be terrorists, and they can be, targeted like this, and the world is silent. And oftentimes you hear from some of these fanatics that support the genocide, is they justify saying, well, when they grow up, they're going to be killers and militants, and we have to kill them before they grow up and kill us. This type of rationale. You don't know how this child is going to respond.
Right.
And definitely, if you keep killing them, starving them, and killing their parents, they're not going to develop love for you. Not because they hate your race or ethnicity, mostly because they hate what you did to them.
Right. And
it's just human nature to want some sort of vengeance or something, or to get back at the people that killed your family. So if there's any type of violence in the future, it's not because they hate you for your religion or ethnicity.
Right. And they won't have the option of going to California and starting soup kitchens.
Yeah, they're stuck. They can't leave.
They're stuck.
So what happens? What's the process if somebody files a complaint against another member within the party?
Well, it starts with phone calls to the party chair. And so she called me, not actually having read my email, which kind of disappointed me, because I thought it was a long email, but it was very
How do you know
eloquent.
she didn't read it? Because she's not here to defend herself.
I asked her.
Oh, okay.
I said, I guess you're calling me about the email that I sent last night. And she said, no, but I'm getting complaints about you.
She could. I mean, that's a fair. Sometimes people call me before, or I don't see the email, so she could have gone back to read it later.
I hope so.
Yeah.
I did bring it up again recently.
Okay.
But in any case, she said, we've talked about social media before and how difficult it can be. I actually had a bit of a personal conflict with somebody before I joined the DEC. After I had worked with the FDP, over blame about who lost the 2022 election. And we had agreed, Ione Townsend and I, that the safest thing to do was just to stop posting anything on Facebook, because people take screenshots, and that's how controversy starts.
Yeah.
It's not because he said, she said.
Now I'm interested in, who do you think is to blame for the 2020? I mean, which part of the 2020 loss to who? I mean, in Florida. Or are you talking about...
this was 2022 that we were discussing.
And what, is it the local races, the state races? What was the issue?
State races really was the biggest issue, because it was such a disappointment that Andrew Gillum lost a close race and that we lost a Senate seat. I believe at that time to... Oh, that's 2018.
Yeah.
I'm getting mixed up. I'm sorry. But it was such a disappointment that Charlie Crist had lost and that Marco Rubio got reelected and that we couldn't get Valerie Demings in. And there was a lot of, is it the DNC's fault? Is it the FDP's fault? And I worked for the FDP, so I was upset.
So you were defending the FDP?
Yeah. Okay. And asking, well, what did you do? I know what I did.
There's a lot of there's a lot of finger pointing afterwards. Well, what was your role in the FDP at the time?
Well, it's a temporary position, and the day after the election, you help clean up, and then it's done. But I was a field organizer, and I was in charge of recruiting volunteers, knocking on doors, training them to knock on doors.
And that was a paid position with the FDP?
It was a paid position, paid about $15.75 an hour.
Okay.
And on paper, offered free benefits, but we had some difficulties with healthcare benefits during the pandemic, unfortunately. Anyway, that's another story.
We're only talking about that just to mention that it's not like you were only a volunteer. You were actually working within the party. You know the party rules. You worked with the party chair.
Yes.
You worked with the structure of the Democratic Party. They know who you are. It's not like you're just somebody out of the blue that's just started talking about Gaza and they don't know your history.
Right. But to go back to where we were, the base solution, at least temporarily, was to stop posting on Facebook. And I offered this again now that this new controversy was coming up. I said, well, I'll just stop posting on Facebook.
Would you feel like that was a way to silence you?
Oh, well, it was definitely cutting off an avenue of free speech. But she was saying... And I understand her point of view. If people are going to be calling me all day to complain about you, what are we going to do about that? And I said, well, I'll offer... stop posting on Facebook. That doesn't mean I would stop discussing this issue with people and bringing it up.
So then what happened?
Then we get to Memorial Day weekend.
Which is last May.
Right.
Okay. End of May.
Ione gives me a call, says, I need to talk to you about something. And it makes me a little nervous. I start checking in with my friends who also know Ione, and they think, oh, well, she might just be asking you to run for something, like one of the local party offices, nothing fancy. And I said, okay, but we've had other discussions, and I think it might be about something else. And I come in, and the formal complaint has now been made. Now, something else happened right before that. We have county meetings every month on the third Monday.
Okay.
And even though, I was a little frustrated.
Is that a public meeting?
Yes and no.
Oh, okay.
You can sign up for them through what we call Mobilize, and you will usually be vetted to make sure that you're at least a Democrat and haven't been a troublemaker before. But oftentimes they'll give people the benefit of the doubt and let them into the meeting. It's become Zoom only recently.
Oh, okay. It's Zoom. So I was wondering, how are they going to block you from walking in?
Right. We'll come back to that later.
Okay. So what happened at this meeting before?
This meeting before, I mentioned at the end, I made an announcement, because you always have announcements at the end, that we were pursuing forming a Hillsborough County chapter of the Muslim Caucus.
Okay.
And that was received with enthusiasm from Ione Townsend.
Good.
And from the person at the county level who's in charge of making sure clubs and caucuses keep going and that we bring new ones in.
There's a sizable Muslim community in Hillsborough County, so that would make sense.
Right, exactly. And they'd tried it before, I heard. But I think this might have been part of why a formal complaint was then filed.
Okay.
Because this was only about a week and a half.
So that was the only thing that had happened since you had the conversation about not posting anymore. You stopped posting.
Right.
You thought the issues kind of went away. And now all of a sudden at a meeting, you're just simply doing what, trying to get more people involved and saying, well, we may be working on forming a new Muslim caucus within the party, as other communities have. And then that then a week later or sometime later, you got the formal complaint came in.
Yes, which led to a one-on-one conversation with the party chair. And she said,
which
it was
part?
again Ione Townsend.
Okay, the local party chair.
Right. Chair Freed and I have never spoken.
Okay. We'll get to Freed later.
Right. So she says, well, this Facebook post with the cartoon, they're really mad about. And what they'd like you to do is not bring this issue up anymore. Not just not post on Facebook anymore, just like not bring it up in any meetings or public forums until the election. And they're saying, and people who have made this complaint are even saying, you must not be for Joe Biden because he's very pro-Israel. And I'm arguing the opposite, because at this time Biden had been withholding some of the military supplies to the Israelis.
Yeah, there was these massive bombs at the 5,000 pound and 2,000 pound bombs.
And I was still optimistic that he would withhold more of them, that this was the beginning of something good. And
is that a party requirement to be for the party nominee? Like to be a Democrat activist, you have to be full in behind the...
I would say to be active as an official precinct captain
who
works for the DEC, which is part of the FDP, which is part of the DNC. Once a Democratic candidate is chosen after a primary, you're pulling for that candidate. You can't be openly saying, oh, we should vote for Trump because you're out. That would be a violation of what we call your loyalty oath, which is really the only thing you have to do as a registered Democrat.
But you can't just say, well, I'm against Biden, but I'm for everybody else. I mean, or I am not voting for Biden, but I'm for all the other Democrats.
I think they would have grounds for violation of loyalty oath.
Okay, so there's something called a loyalty oath within the party.
Right, and it's the only thing you have to take to become a precinct captain.
Okay. And your loyalty is to what? You're giving an oath to what?
When Democratic nominees are chosen after the primaries, you're only going to help those Democrats.
Okay.
Right, you're not going to vote for someone who's an independent or someone who's a Republican. They can't check and see who you voted for, of course. Yeah, but you can't, especially, I mean, the thing that they can really get you on is you make a campaign contribution to one of those other candidates, because that's a public record.
Okay, yeah. Okay, so then what happened? The formal complaint is filed.
Okay. And during this conversation, I say, well, I'm not, they also wanted an apology. And I said, I think that cartoon's legitimate. What I'm describing there, they may not like the use of the word fascist, which was something that was brought up. They may not like the comparison of Nazi with what the Israeli government is doing, but this is accurate, and I'm not going to take it back or apologize for it. And she said, I'm fighting for you, but I don't know if I'm going to save you, because apparently they had that much influence. They could push me out as volunteer coordinator. And I said, well, let me think about this, whether I really want to take that pledge not to talk about this issue through the end of the election. And then the next morning, I found out that there was an incendiary bomb that went off in Gaza and that there was video of people burning to death, civilians in a tent camp. And I called the chair up and I said, I'm not going to stop talking about this issue. I'm going to post on Facebook right now about it. And she said, well, I guess I'll be accepting your resignation. And I said, no, I'm not going to resign either. So she said, I guess I'll be relieving you of your duties. And so I was let go as volunteer coordinator at that point.
And she has the power to just do that without, there's no grievance committee, there's no vote.
That was a controversy too. But I took it that she did. I did not know that there was a formal procedure. And later that night, I had access to the email list for all the precinct captains, and I sent out a farewell letter, but it was not a resignation. And I
Your farewell as a volunteer coordinator.
Yes, that I was no longer going to be the volunteer coordinator, and I was really looking forward to working on issues affecting children, especially, without mentioning Gaza. Because I didn't want to start a firestorm right then. And Ione then emailed me saying, I guess I will accept this as your resignation. And I didn't reply to that. But I have told everybody since then I was let go, I was fired. I did not have the option of coming back. I was being let go.
Okay, so you were let go. You accepted being let go. You sent the farewell.
Yes.
But you were staying as a precinct captain.
Yes.
What is a precinct captain?
Precinct captain, there's a male and a female slot available.
What is
in
a
every
precinct?
Precinct is a division within each county that has its own polling place. Sometimes they share polling places. And it usually has less than 1,000 registered voters of each party in it.
It's basically the place you go vote.
That's one way of describing it.
And around that, there is like a geographic boundary for this precinct?
Exactly.
How many precincts are there in Hillsborough County?
Around 450.
450. So that means there's 450 polling sites.
No, because some precincts share polling sites.
But technically, there could be 2 precincts or 3 they're sharing, but they represent 450 districts or areas.
I'm not sure I understand.
Geographic areas. Are there 450 geographic areas?
Yes.
That are precincts. So the county is divided into 450 little neighborhoods.
Give or take a few, yes.
Okay. And you are in which precinct?
585. It's up in Lutz.
Okay. So you're saying that within these precincts, there is a precinct captain.
Right.
And according to the Democrats, there's a 1 woman, 1 man.
Republicans too.
And Republicans also have 1 woman, 1 man?
Right. Unless you're in a precinct with a couple thousand Democrats in it, then you can have 2 men and 2 women.
What's the role and duties of a precinct captain within the party?
You want to help recruit volunteers to help you get out the vote and register voters and do voter education within your precinct. And that usually involves knocking on doors and making phone calls, sending text messages, sending emails.
So these are the foot soldiers around election time to make sure people go out and vote for your side.
Yes. And you go with them.
Yeah. And you go with them and you lead them. And this is a volunteer position. Right. It's not paid.
Not paid. So, it's illegal to pay a precinct captain to do that kind of work.
Okay, and how long is the term for a precinct captain?
There's 2 kinds of precinct captains. There's appointed and elected, but if you fill out the paperwork with the supervisor of elections, you serve a 4-year term.
And what are you, elected or appointed?
I am elected. I was appointed prior to this November's elections, and now I'm elected on a 4-year term.
So you're on a 4-year term. This is once you're elected. How can people remove you as a precinct captain? Or can you be removed? You can resign, or you can.
I believe you can be voted out at a county meeting. This is according to a letter that Chair Freed sent out.
Let's get to the letter in a second, but this is what you come to know according to some. So
right.
This is governed by what? The Florida Democratic Party charter?
Perhaps.
Okay. So you're in this precinct captain. You want to continue doing that. What's the issue now since May? You now, left. Did you go back to posting on Facebook?
Yes.
Because now you're no longer in that role.
Yes. I and some other Democrats who were very concerned about this issue. And not all of us are Muslims. I would say in this group of about 8 people, we had 2 Jewish people, 1 Muslim person, and a lot of people who were really interested in foreign policy. And so we were up on this, and we knew what was happening. And we decided we would form something called the Anti-Genocide Coalition. Very specific issue.
Like
yes.
who wouldn't want to be anti-genocide?
Exactly. I mean,
it seems like all Democrats would be anti-genocide.
Right.
But are people opposed to this anti-genocide committee?
Yes.
Okay, and they're Democrats?
Yes.
What's their justification?
There's definitions for the word anti-Semitism, right? There's the one in the dictionary.
What does anti-Semitism have to do with anti-genocide? You'd think that both of them are on the same side.
Well, according to a definition that a group has been trying to get enacted, I imagine you're aware of APAC, the Americans for Israel Public Affairs Committee. They're
listening to you now, I'm sure. They're probably listening right now.
Somebody, sure.
The APAC people.
Right. They want the definition to be, in particular, criticizing the Israeli genocide, when there are other genocides going on that might be worse, like the one in Sudan. But our rationale for focusing on the Israeli one is, we're giving weapons, donating weapons to this cause. even though we're fully aware that the International Criminal Court is charged with war crimes, the Israeli Prime Minister and the Defense Minister, which makes it illegal. You have laws like the Leahy Act,
right,
and you have laws saying that if a country is not allowing humanitarian supplies in, then you can't give them military aid either. And the Israelis were restricting food, medicine, clean water, shelter.
Until now.
Mm-hmm. And even now.
Yeah, continuing to
ongoing.
Do it. Ongoing. So what's the status of your situation now? You're within the party, and I understand there was a meeting in November or something.
Well, there have been several meetings. How much time have we got?
We have about 8 minutes, 9 minutes.
Well, unbeknownst to me, there were meetings going on behind the scene through what we called the Credentials Committee. And they would meet multiple times because the first time they met, they decided I should not be expelled. And the second time they met, this would be in August, they received testimony from Ione Townsend as to things I had said to her and decided, well, I should be expelled for 2 years and not be allowed to attend any functions.
Expelled?
Yes.
I mean, what was so egregious that you did that justifies expelling from the party?
Oh. Basically, the things that I've said to you.
Which is basically saying you're standing with the children and against the starvation.
Yes. My feeling is, though, that Chair Townsend misrepresented some of our face-to-face conversation and said that I was completely
That's interesting because I met Ione Townsend before, and she seemed like a reasonable person. She attended many things. I happen to be Muslim. She's attended things within the Muslim community. She seemed... But okay, so things you feel like, because you were not, you were not there. They didn't give you an opportunity to speak for yourself.
They kept this a secret.
Secret meetings behind closed doors, deciding your fate. What did they end up doing at the end?
Well, they took it to the steering committee, which is all the club and caucus presidents, committee chairs. It's about 40 people out of the 270 precinct captains that exist. And they said, well, the credentials committee said, he's guilty of anti-Semitism. He should be expelled for 2 years. And there was a big dust-up because they had waited until the very end of this meeting, and a lot of people had already logged off and gone home. And out of the 40 that could have been in there were only 15.
Okay.
And most of them knew that this was about to happen. And so a friend of mine who had said he'd be out of town came back early, started raising trouble. He's also on the Anti-Genocide Coalition. Another person of the Anti-Genocide Coalition who's on that committee logged in. And they at least delayed the vote. This meeting went on for hours. And they first didn't want to show the evidence, right? These screenshots of Facebook posts. And they were saying, well, he said all the Jewish
evidence.
people.
They want to use secret evidence to expel you without sharing. I mean, this does not seem very democratic or very... There's no due process.
Right, and I'm not allowed to be in this meeting either.
It seems like very, against everything that Democrats speak for.
So they took it to an extended special meeting because they ran out of time.
Okay.
And they raised it again. And this time they lowered the charges because they couldn't get me expelled. And said, well, he needs to apologize formally to the Jewish caucus. He needs to go to DEI training.
Okay.
And admit to being an anti-Semite, essentially, which I wasn't going to do.
Okay.
We decided...
They're treating you like you're a white supremacist, part of the Proud Boys.
The election is going on in September. We're in high gear, right?
Instead of focusing on winning the county, this is what they're having all these meetings about?
Right. Exactly. Taking up hours of time where people could have been organizing.
You're talking about hours of time trying to just... It feels like, were they trying to make an example out of you? That,
yes.
You either shut up or this is what's going to happen?
Oh, yes. And although there were other people in the Anti-Genocide Coalition, they were completely focused on me.
Well, they have to, as a strategy, if you, focus all your target, you can't get rid of all of them. But if you focus on one, then everybody else will, get in line.
And there were people who had been complainants who were part of the Jewish Caucus's board who were also allowed to serve in that steering committee that was essentially the jury and allowed to make recommendations as to what my punishment should be.
So they did not recuse themselves?
Not at all.
Okay, it seems like there's a conflict of interest if you're making the allegations and seeking certain things. You're the complainant and you're also deciding the fate.
Right. But we did at least get them to postpone Ione Townsend coming to tell me and lay down the ultimatum about what I needed to do until after the election.
Okay.
We met, the terms expire on let's call it December 2nd.
The terms of what?
The terms of the current party chair and all the other elected officers for the Hillsborough DEC. And we wanted to get this out of the way, all of us. And I just said, you did not give me due process when we met on November 26th to discuss this, her and the other 6
right before
officers.
Thanksgiving?
Yeah. And I said, I had been in line to become the Harris person in Hillsborough County, which is a paid position. And this kept me from being able to apply for that. I was persona non grata with them. And we were pretty sure that Nikki Fried had some role in this. If you look on her Wikipedia page, it says at one time she wanted to serve in the Israeli military, so she's taken aside.
Nikki Fried is the chair of the party in Florida.
Florida Democratic Party, who ran for governor and lost in the primary in 2022. Used to be commissioner of agriculture before that.
Right.
And we thought some of the reasons why this is coming out of like a credentials committee and then going back to a credentials committee is somebody saying not good enough. And we're pretty sure.
There's a hand behind this.
Yeah, and I had friends who work at the FDP, and they would say, I'm anti-genocide too, and I just want to say I'm so sorry for what's happening to you. And I would think, well, how do you know?
Okay, so then what did you discover?
Well, on November the 26th, the Anti-Genocide Coalition and I gave our response and said, we're not going to accept these punishments. And if you insist, we'll sue. And I don't know what the outcome of that was. There were some documents that Reed received from them that had been altered. At least one document had been altered, and we said, we don't trust this committee to do the right thing. And I announced the next day or two that I would run for lead state committee man, who gets to be one of the FDP representatives who decides who the next FDP chair is going to be. And that election for those committee men was December 2nd.
Okay, so there was a election December 2nd for the committee men.
Yes.
And you said you're going to run for it, and what happened?
3 hours before that election is supposed to take place, Chair Fried sends out a letter describing me as a horrible anti-Semite, and that I should be expelled from the party, and that at the very least you shouldn't vote for this guy for state committee man. But I had also said, as I've been talking about my talking points for what I would do as lead state committeeman, that I was not going to re-elect the current party chair.
So, and I think you told me about this letter, and it was on the party letterhead. This was an official party letterhead.
Sent out by email to anybody who could vote in that election, about 270, but of course not me.
So, you were excluded.
I was excluded.
Okay, but you got a copy of the letter. So, how did the election turn out?
I lost.
Okay,
there were about 25 people who were up for those state committee men posts, about 24. Other people got elected.
So what's next now? We have just 2 minutes or a minute and a half. What's next now? And,
Well, Chair Fried described a process whereby at the next county meeting, when all the precinct captains are invited, usually they don't all go, if 2/3 of them vote to expel me for quote-unquote malfeasance or other reasons, then I'm gone. And so I've, again, been organizing in a different way to get out the vote, to make sure that my friends are aware of what's really been going on, and to bring in as many new precinct captains as possible.
When is the next meeting?
January 27th. It's a Monday.
How can people get involved or learn more about your situation?
Sign up to go to that meeting at the Hillsborough County Democrats website. They can apply to become a precinct captain. And as long as you're a Democrat and you get 2 other Hillsborough Democrats, you don't have to be informally precinct captains to say, he's going to obey his loyalty oath or her loyalty oath. You will become a precinct captain, most likely.
So you're out recruiting precinct captains.
Just like I always was.
Okay. So
for a different purpose.
How can people get a hold of you or get in touch with you?
I have an email address.
Okay.
russmillerwy@proton.me. Russ Miller, W-Y, I used to live in Wyoming, at proton.me. It's probably the easiest way.
Okay, well, we're out of time. We'll hope to keep track of what's been going on, keep us informed. Maybe we'll have you back on to discuss more about, what's happening with the local party. This has been True Talk on WMNF. I'm glad we had Russ Miller on. And, hey, it's open invitation to the party chair or somebody from the party if they want to come on and tell us what happened or tell us their side of the story. We'd be happy to entertain that. You can call us here at 813-239-9663 or 813-238-8001 or email us at truetalk@WMNF. This is WMNF Tampa. NPR News is now.